The follow-up is simple. Ask a question, listen to the answer, then follow up. I'm your host, Noah Kozlov. Enjoy. Hi. Thanks for checking out another episode of the Follow-Up Podcast. I'm Noah. This is my 6-year-old daughter, Eden. Every week, it's a new podcast from on her bed here in our apartment in New York City. You can watch this podcast, which I guess would just make it a video, on vocalnow.com, VOKAL now.com, or if you have Roku, Vocal, VOKAL, the Vocal Roku channel. You can also listen to all of these, or do both, but you can listen to them on Apple Podcasts, and that's where you can subscribe, rate, review, and send us your suggestions, because maybe your suggestions would lead to a topic that Eden would want to talk about, or a recipe that she would want to make, or a TV show she'd want to watch, or thoughts on the NBA MVP conversation. So many different options. It's always Eden's topic of choice, so today
we're going to talk about books again, but specifically biographies.
What do you like reading biographies so much? Because I used to like reading biographies a lot as a kid.
Well, I really like biographies because when you read, you get to learn about people, and it's interesting to see like what their life was about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and almost knowing how their life turned out, but then reading the biography and seeing what they were like when they were your age.
And like what they went through.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff is pretty unimaginable.
Mm-hmm.
What a lot of the folks went through.
Some are just like interesting people, and just some are different than what you just said.
Mm-hmm. So you've read a few different biographies. Mm-hmm. Do you want to highlight a few of the not the specific biographies, but highlight a few of the series, and then maybe we'll talk about some of the specific ones?
The who was, who is, and what was.
Mm-hmm. So this is the one you're reading right now.
Who was Elvis Presley book.
Mm-hmm.
And with these series, it shows you, like, if you read this first, I like to read this first because it kind of tells you a little. And
What's it say?
All of above, so all of these are true facts.
What's it say?
A shy boy who was sometimes teased by classmates,
mm-hmm.
a singer who became famous when he was only 21, the man known around the world as the king of rock and roll.
Right. Yeah, so these are all the things that
Elvis
Presley was known for. And so reading the who is, who was, when you see a who was book, you know that the person's dead.
Yeah.
Does that make it any different does it give you any different feelings when you're reading their story knowing that this person is already dead?
No, but it's different from a who is book because you get to learn about their whole life, not just like the part of their life until the moment.
Right, until the book was printed. Okay, what other series do you have here?
I have the Little People, Big Dreams,
mm-hmm.
and I have the Coco Chanel book. I love this book. And we have a few others in the book, and they're a really good series. So, one reason is because it tells you like the story, and then in the back it has like true pictures that were really
mm-hmm.
taken of her, and it gives you like kind of like what do you call it?
It gives you a timeline of their life too. I mean, these are much shorter, but then they have a real timeline of her life.
Yeah.
And
then we have Ordinary People Change the World, and this one is I Am Helen Keller. I also have the Mary Carey book,
mm-hmm.
and I like this series. It kind of relates to this book and that series mm-hmm. because it tells you real facts, like just like here it does, but it's kind of like it's basically the same thing, just a different series and longer books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a little bit, right. The I Am stories are a little bit longer. They're beautifully illustrated,
mm-hmm.
and they really tried to speak to kids your age and maybe a little bit older. Like when I was talking about what they went through being unimaginable, like Helen Keller is one of them.
Right.
I mean, blind and death, and then to not only just continue to live any sort of life,
Right.
but to be able to achieve what she did is spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
You also read in the Who Was series about John F. Kennedy,
Yeah, I did.
which I thought was really interesting because you started reading that in school, and then you would write down some words that you didn't know what they
Yeah.
meant.
Or I didn't know how to read
Mm-hmm.
them. Or I didn't know how to read them and didn't know what they meant.
Yeah, so then you'd come home and we'd take a look at them, and some of the words on there were, specific, like Hyannis, like in Massachusetts where he lived, or Princeton,
or
where he went to
elite,
school.
or
The word elite, which is a great word
it's
for.
spelled like it's ELITE, so it's spelled like E-light.
Right. But then even one of the words you wrote down was Nazis, which led to not, because I don't think you're ready for it yet, but a kind of like a broader overview of the Holocaust when you wrote Nazis down, and so then
I don't know what you're talking
well.
about.
It's part of a longer conversation. That was the NAZI you'd written down, and then also we read about Frederick Douglass.
Mm-hmm. I read that book on Epic, and it was like this bear, or whatever you call it, was talking basically about conversation. Frederick Douglass.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like a story conversation.
Mm-hmm. As if it was a real conversation that they were having. So we learned about
Hundreds of years.
we talked about slavery, and then from that you read Harriet Tubman's book,
Mm-hmm.
all about the Underground Railroad,
Yeah.
and all the folks that helped out along the way.
Mm-hmm.
I think next I want to read Roberto Clemente's Who Was story,
Okay.
because that was Grandpa Sonny's idol as a child growing up in Pittsburgh.
Well, do you think I could read that? Or do you want to read that?
Yeah, I think you. Yeah, I'm sure you could read it. Yeah, I mean, you know how it ends, unfortunately, but yeah, we could read that.
Because we already did fiction reading, but we're doing another series of fiction. We're just doing fiction
In school?
again in school, but you can also read nonfiction. So I'm going to do like a mix of fiction and nonfiction.
What are your favorite type of fiction stories?
Fiction, I like my favorite type of just any book is just I like any book that doesn't have chapters, but I do like chapter books because they can also give you more information
True.
because they're longer.
Are you going to be doing fiction writing at school too, like making up stories?
I think that's the last unit.
Huh. That could be fun. You could just
No, but
Come
that's
up with any
fiction. The last one is fiction series writing.
fiction series writing.
Yeah, so like a series, you make a fiction book.
Uh huh.
You make a fiction book, but then you turn that book and then you make a series.
Oh, just like
Like Junie B. Jones.
right. Junie B. Jones. My
Is-
goodness,
Very fun.
she's wacky.
And the first time we read it, Mom was laughing like crazy.
Yeah, I had to take over.
Just like Dragons Love Tacos. She was laughing like crazy.
What book was that?
Dragons Love Tacos! I like that.
Yeah. that was
Remember when
funny.
she was laughing like crazy?
That was fun. That was funny. Is there anybody that, off the top of your head, that you could think of a biography that you'd want to read that you haven't read?
Let's see. Oh, I forgot to mention this.
What's that?
That we read Who Was George Washington book.
That was very interesting.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Very.
And it also and then there was another one about like what is the presidential election. So we learned a lot about the presidential
And I
election.
think it was in this series. It just looks different.
Mm-hmm. It was. Mm-hmm.
It looked very different.
And that led to you
Writing
being
more.
pretty interested about the presidents.
I love presidents.
So is there maybe a presidential biography you'd want to read from that series if it was available?
If it was available. I don't know. I liked. What was that book of 3 that we?
Yeah, that had 3 of them. But is there one president you could think of that you might want to
That
read about?
that.
Just pick one.
The Can't even remember all the presidents.
You don't need to think of all the presidents. How about the president we read about in the Frederick Douglass book?
Abraham Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
That would be interesting.
That would be interesting.
Okay, so we'll look for that.
Maybe.
Maybe. All right. I love you.
I love you.